families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
America, the woman you just heard, that is Cea Weaver. And she was just appointed by New York City's new socialist mayor to run the Office to Protect Tenants. She literally called homeownership a weapon of white supremacy and posted Cea's private property on her social media. But here's the kicker. Her own mother owns a $1.6 million home in a gentrified neighborhood. This isn't just hypocrisy, folks. This is full-blown communist ideology taking over America's largest city, and they're not even hiding it anymore.
For too long, bad landlords have been allowed to mistreat their tenants with impunity. That ends today.
What is up, guys? TYSON DELACRUZ here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This story is a perfect example of how the radical left wants to destroy the American dream of homeownership while protecting their own wealth and property. And I'm going to show you exactly how deep this communist rabbit hole goes. Let me break down exactly who Mayor Zohran Mamdani just put in charge of the housing policy for 8.3 million New Yorkers. Her name is Cea Weaver, and she isn't some moderate Democrat trying to help renters. She is a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America with a social media history that reads like a communist manifesto. Here are her exact quotes from deleted Twitter posts. On June 2018, Cea's private property, exclamation point. August 2019, private property, including any kind of especially homeownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. December 2017, elect more communists. May 2020, the police are just people the state sanctions to murder with immunity. Now, I want you to understand something. This isn't some college kid posting edgy content to get random attention from people. This is a grown woman who just got handed enormous power over housing policy in the largest city in America. She was a key advisor to Mamdani's campaign, and he knew exactly what he was getting.
Because to be fair to Zohran Mamdani, he ran as this guy. I would refer to him as the commie candidate, and I'd have people say, no, communism's over. He's not running as a communist. He literally was running as a communist.
Carol nails it right here. Mamdani didn't hide who he was. He ran as a communist, and New York voters either didn't care or actually wanted this for some crazy odd reason. But here's what they're about to find out. Communist housing policy have failed everywhere, every single where that they have tried. Every single time. Now, here's where it gets absolutely ridiculous. While Cea Weaver is out here calling homeownership white supremacy and demanding the government seize private property, guess what her own family owns? I'll let you guess. A $1.6 million home. Her mother was a professor at Vanderbilt University and owns this multi-million-dollar property in Tennessee, in, coincidentally enough, a neighborhood Weaver herself complained was being gentrified. So let me get this straight. When your family owns property, that is completely fine. When working class Americans saved for decades to buy a house and build generational wealth, that's white supremacy. This, my friends, is classic rule for thee and not for me mentality that defines every single socialist that ever lived.
Communism has failed every single time it's been tried. It has never worked. And so the idea that the Mamdani administration is going to be first to make it successful is ridiculous. And of course, it's always somebody as white as this woman telling us that housing is a white supremacy goal.
She's talking about how families need to have a different relationship to property. Translation, your home that you worked overtime to afford, that you saved for, that you're building equity in, that's not really yours anymore. It's a collective good that should be shared with people who haven't done anything to actually earn it. This, my friends, is straight out of the communist playbook. They always exempt themselves from their own policies. The elites get to keep their $1 million homes while telling you that your 3-bedroom ranch ranch in the suburbs is somehow oppressing people. Mamdani isn't wasting any time implementing his communist vision. During his inaugural address, he literally quoted communist leaders and talked about collectivism versus individualism. His first major policy proposal: freeze rent on 1 million rent-regulated apartments.
For tenants who have felt forgotten until now.
This is like really rare for somebody, a mayor, to come to the tenants to hear what we have to say.
Look at that celebration. Those tenants think Zohran Mamdani is going to save them. But here's what's really going to happen. When you freeze rents and attack property owners, you don't create more housing. You actually, crazily enough, destroy it. The property owners will stop maintaining buildings and eventually sell it and get out of the market entirely. Mamdani also signed an executive order creating rental ripoff hearings across all 5 boroughs. Sounds good, right? Wrong. This gives the city unprecedented power to interfere with private contracts between landlords and tenants. It's government overreach disguised as quote-unquote tenant protection.
Stepping in to represent the interests of the city and the interests of the tenants and say, once and for all, who this government will be fighting for.
Here's what he's really saying. If your landlord does not responsibly steward your home, city government will step in. That's government seizure of private property with a little extra steps. They're creating a framework where the city can take over buildings whenever they decide the landlord isn't meeting their particular standards. And who decides what those standards are? The same government that runs New York City Housing Authority, some of the most dangerous, poorly maintained housing in America. Let's talk about what happens when government runs housing. New York City already has a massive public housing system, the New York City Housing Authority, and it is an absolute disaster.
Letting our viewers in on a little, some facts about the conditions of what public housing in New York City is. The quality of that is really like, and that's what she's calling for.
Yeah.
It's often called NYCHA. The conditions are abysmal. The mismanagement is rampant. Allegations of fraud aplenty. It is not the type of place that anyone would want to live.
That's what government housing looks like in reality. And Cea Weaver and Zohran Mamdani want to expand this model across the entire city. You know why? Because it's not actually about helping tenants. It is about one word: control. When the government controls housing, they control where you live, how you live, and ultimately how you vote. It is about creating a dependent class of people who rely on the government for basic needs.
I think once the reality hits them, they're going to see what it actually is like. The projects, you know, as we refer to them in New York, the public housing, were somewhere no one wanted to be there. No one wanted to live there. The conditions were terrible. And that's what government housing is all about. That's what happens when the government runs housing.
Private property is the foundation of freedom in America. When you own your own home, you have independence, you have security, you can build wealth and pass it on to your children. That's why communists hate it. They can't control people who own property and build wealth. So what's going to happen to New York City under this communist leadership? Let me tell you exactly what's coming, because we've seen this pattern in every city where socialists take power. First, property owners are going to leave when you make it impossible to operate rental properties, quote unquote, profitable, when you freeze rents while property taxes and maintenance costs keep rising, when you threaten to seize buildings, property owners choose better jurisdictions. They will sell their buildings to invest in places like Florida, Nevada, Texas, Tennessee, anywhere but New York. Secondly, housing quality is going to decline more than it already does. When landlords can't raise rents to cover maintenance costs, buildings obviously get deteriorated. We're already seeing this in rent-controlled buildings across the city. Third, new construction is going to stop. Why would any developer in its right mind build new housing in a city where government can freeze your rents and threaten to seize your property?
Just because you're white doesn't mean you have fewer rights in this country. We all have equal rights in our country, and we will not stand for New York City violating any federal law whatsoever. We will swoop right in and do what's necessary to protect all all citizens and taxpayers and residents of New York who are there illegally.
The Department of Justice is already putting New York City on notice. They're watching for violations of federal law because here's what Mamdani and Weaver don't understand, or maybe they do understand it and just don't care. The Constitution protects private rights. You can't just seize private property because you don't like capitalism.
Notice how they never talk about the New York City Housing Authority being poorly maintained. The worst slums in the city are run by the government, but you never hear them talk about that because they don't actually care about improving anything at all. They're interested in developing a pretense for seizing private property.
They're interested in creating a pretense for seizing private property. It's about power, not about people. This communist takeover isn't limited to New York City. Seattle just elected Katie Wilson, another socialist mayor, pushing the same anti-property ownership agenda. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, every major city run by Democrats is implementing the same version of these policies. And here's what's really concerning. Many Democrats don't even realize they're supporting communist policies. They think rent control sounds compassionate. They think attacking landlords sounds like helping tenants. But these policies have been tried for decades, and they always produce the same results: housing shortages, declining quality, and economic stagnation. The evidence is everywhere. Property owners are fleeing to red states. Real estate investors are avoiding blue cities. I know I am. Small landlords are selling their properties rather than deal with hostile regulations, and housing shortages are getting worse despite billions and billions of dollars in government spending.
Mayor Mamdani left the spotlight at City Hall and made a beeline to visit someone's dilapidated bathroom in Brooklyn.
For too long, bad landlords have been allowed to mistreat their tenants with impunity. That ends today.
Look at the theater. Mamdani goes to visit one of the tenants' bathrooms with mold problems and declares war on all landlords. But he's not going to fix the tenant's bathroom. He's going to create a regulatory environment that makes it even harder for landlords to maintain their properties. America, we're watching the complete destruction of property rights play out in real time in New York City, when government officials openly call for seizing private property and declaring homeownership white supremacy. We're not dealing with policy differences. We're dealing with communist ideology that have failed everywhere it's been tried. The pattern here is crystal clear. Socialist politicians create housing crises through bad policies, then use those crises to justify even more government control. They attack private property owners while living in multi-million-dollar homes. They promise to help tenants while creating conditions that destroy housing quality and availability.
Former New York City Mayor Eric Adams slammed Weaver, posting, "Homeownership is how immigrants, Black, brown, and working class New Yorkers built stability and generational wealth despite every obstacle. You have to be completely out of your mind to call that white supremacy."
Even Eric Adams, who's no conservative, recognizes how insane this is. Calling that white supremacy is completely detached from reality. The Constitution protects private property rights, but those protections only matter if we elect leaders who will defend them. New York voters chose communism. Now they're going to learn what that actually means. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comments section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.